Hollywood is not an easy place to live. It can bring you fame, but it can also lead to tragedies, downfalls, and lifelong struggles. This is exactly what happened to some child stars of classic Hollywood. We are going to uncover the worst downfalls in Tinseltown. Stay connected, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Judy Garland. She was born Frances Ethel Gum, but the world knew her as Judy Garland. Even today, many people see her as the bright-eyed young singer who brought Dorothy to life in The Wizard of Oz. Back then, MGM saw her as a precious gem they could shape and mold however they wanted. They gave her pills to keep her awake, pills to make her sleep, and more pills to help her stay thin. She was just a teenager, yet she carried an entire studio on her back. Critics praised her voice as a gift from heaven. Fans loved her pure energy. She sang Over the Rainbow, and millions believed she was living inside a fairy tale. But the truth was darker. Studio heads often told her she wasn't beautiful enough. They said her weight was a problem. They said her nose was too short, or her face too round. She felt ugly and insecure. Sometimes, Judy would collapse from exhaustion between takes. They would give her a quick shot of adrenaline, rush her back to set, and continue filming. Nobody paused to think about what this was doing to her mind. It was all about production schedules and money. As she grew older, the cycle of pills, diets, and constant work became the only life she knew. By the time she reached her 20s, she had also discovered alcohol. This began years of instability, broken relationships, and hospital visits. She tried her best to shake free from MGM and find her own path. But the damage was done. The same industry that once praised her now questioned if she was reliable at all. Her voice remained iconic, but her body grew frail. The spotlight, which once lit up her face, now revealed her struggles. By her late 40s, Garland had lost large sums of money due to poor management and her own impulsive spending. There were stories of her being unable to pay basic bills. She would borrow from friends, promise to perform shows she was too unwell to finish, and fall deeper into debt. In 1969, she was found lifeless in a London home. The coroner said it was an accidental overdose of barbiturates. She was just 47. Fans wept worldwide, remembering that sweet Kansas girl with ruby slippers, not the broken woman behind the curtain. Her story became a symbol of Hollywood's cruelty, a cautionary tale for every bright young talent who believes the dream is easy and carefree. Corey Haim. Corey Haim was a Canadian teen idol in the 1980s, shining in films like The Lost Boys and License to Drive. Fans loved his bright eyes and playful smile. Many saw him as the sweet kid who could do no wrong. But behind that boyish grin, Corey dealt with burdens most never knew. He started acting as a child, facing long hours on set and the pressure to stay popular. He rarely had time for normal teenage things, like school dances or lazy Saturday afternoons. He needed to keep up with auditions, meet agents, and stay relevant in the tough world of Hollywood. Fame came early and fast, and Corey found himself surrounded by people who did not always have his best interests at heart. In interviews later on, close friends suggested he had suffered abuses within the industry. It was a dark secret he tried to bury. As he moved into his late teens, Corey discovered drugs as a way to cope. At first, it might have felt like a break from the stress and the memories he wanted to forget. But addictions took hold quickly. He started missing opportunities, turned up late to sets, and found that the roles he hoped for no longer came his way. By the early 1990s, his career had stalled. News outlets ran headlines about his habit and his difficulty staying clean. He tried rehab multiple times, sometimes with short periods of success. But the cycle often repeated, and he'd fall back into old patterns. Financial trouble followed as he struggled to pay rent and maintain the lifestyle people thought he had. The fame that once seemed like a magical gift was now a lingering burden. Producers would hesitate before hiring him, wondering if they could count on his reliability. In March 2010, Corey died at age 38. The coroner attributed his death primarily to pneumonia, though prescription drugs were also found in his system. For fans, it felt like the tragic end of a hopeful boy who never quite escaped his demons. He was once that fresh face on magazine covers, the star who seemed like he could have done anything. But the promise of youth was overshadowed by personal struggles, and Hollywood did little to protect him. In the end, his story served as a grim reminder that child fame can come with hidden pains that never fully heal. Bobby Driscoll. He burst onto the big screen as a bright, charming kid with a sweet smile. His first major role was in Song of the South when he was just 9, making him one of Disney's earliest live-action child stars. By 1950, Bobby Driscoll's name was everywhere. He won a Juvenile Academy Award for The Window and captivated audiences in Treasure Island, portraying Jim Hawkins opposite Robert Newton's unforgettable Long John Silver. Then came Peter Pan in 1953, where he voiced the title character and served as the live-action reference. Walt Disney saw him as the ultimate boyish symbol of innocence. But the magic did not last. As he stepped into his teens, acne flared, and his voice changed. The studio executives said he was no longer fit for the roles they wanted to sell. Disney parted ways with him so abruptly that Bobby only discovered his contract was canceled when security would not let him in at the gate. One day, he was the cherished star with a bright future. The next day, he was nobody. Without Disney, Bobby found that roles dried up fast. Casting directors remembered him as the fresh-faced Disney boy, not a young adult with new dimensions. Desperate for acceptance and a place to belong, he turned to drugs. Arrests soon followed. Possession, disorderly conduct, even burglary. He struggled to hold on to relationships and found little financial stability. By the time he reached his 30s, he was a shell of the boy once hailed as the future of Hollywood. In March 1968, his body was found in an abandoned building in New York's East Village. He had no ID on him, and police buried him in a pauper's grave. The news only reached his family years later when they tried to locate him. Bobby Driscoll's life ended in heartbreak, a far cry from Neverland. He had once been the pride of a studio known for fairy tales, but real life proved harsher than any Captain Hook or ticking crocodile. Jonathan Brandis. In the early 1990s, Jonathan Brandis was everywhere. He dazzled audiences in The Never-Ending Story 2 and gained even more popularity on the series Sequest DSV. With that golden hair and friendly smile, he was every teen magazine's dream cover. Fans wrote him letters by the thousands, and his pictures covered bedroom walls. Directors praised his professionalism and calm presence on set. He wasn't just another heartthrob. He had real acting chops that made viewers believe every word he said. But along with that success came pressure. Jonathan spent his teenage years juggling interviews, press tours, and the relentless demands of Hollywood. He missed out on normal school experiences, replaced instead by lessons from on-set tutors. He tried to keep up with new roles, sometimes turning down scripts that didn't feel right. Yet, as he approached his 20s, the bright spotlight began to dim. He was too old for boyish parts, yet casting directors didn't always see him as an adult lead. The transition was slow and frustrating. Over time, offers that once flowed freely began to dry up. He struggled with this change, feeling it as a personal rejection. Friends noticed he became more withdrawn, battling bouts of depression. He wanted to prove he could do serious roles, but Hollywood can be merciless. The phone calls stopped coming like they used to, and with them went much of Jonathan's sense of identity. In November 2003, he was found in his Los Angeles apartment after a suicide attempt. He passed away the next day at just 27. For so many fans who had grown up adoring him, it was a shocking blow. How could someone with so much success, kindness, and talent feel so hopeless? His story remains a haunting reminder that even a shining star can fall into deep darkness. especially when the industry that once celebrated him moves on without a backward glance. Anissa Jones. Anissa Jones was only 8 when she became Buffy on Family Affair, a sitcom that ran from 1966 to 1971. With her pigtails and trusty Mrs. Beasley doll, she won the hearts of viewers across the country. She embodied innocence, standing alongside her on-screen siblings and Uncle Bill. But when the show ended, Anissa couldn't find any roles that fit. Casting directors saw her only as Buffy, and she felt trapped in that image. She longed for meatier parts, hoping to show she was more than a little girl with a doll. Hollywood, however, had moved on. Her home life was also rocky. Her parents went through a bitter divorce, and there were tug-of-war custody battles that weighed heavily on her mind. In 1974, her father died, leaving her emotionally fragile. Anissa dropped out of high school and moved in with friends, trying to carve out a life free from the constraints of her former fame. When she finally received a trust fund from her Family Affair earnings, it felt like a fresh start. But without guidance, that money quickly became fuel for late-night parties and heavy drug use. Friends recall seeing her mood swings, poor sleeping habits, and a general sense that she was lost. She jumped from one short-term job to another, never finding the stability she needed. On August 28, 1976, she was found unresponsive in a friend's home, the victim of an overdose of various substances. She was just 18. Fans who grew up watching Buffy struggled to understand how their beloved TV friend had faded so tragically. Her death became a symbol of Hollywood's habit of casting children aside once they no longer fit the mold. River Phoenix. River Phoenix seemed like the ultimate child star success. Critics loved his performances in Stand By Me and Running on Empty, calling him wise beyond his years. Off-screen, he was known for his gentle nature, environmental activism, and love of music. He wanted to do things differently, refusing to be just another celebrity. But fame is a hard ride. With success came endless attention. Paparazzi followed him. Fans demanded autographs and stories. Filmmakers wanted him in their next project. He carried the weight of being labeled a young Marlon Brando or the next James Dean. That kind of praise can make a teenager feel overwhelmed. River tried to balance big roles with personal causes, but the pressure kept mounting. Despite his clean image, he began experimenting with drugs. Some believe it was an attempt to escape from the crushing responsibility of being a role model. Others say he was just exploring, like so many young adults do. But in Hollywood, the consequences can be swift and brutal. On the night of October 30th, 1993, River collapsed outside the Viper Room, a popular nightclub partly owned by Johnny Depp at the time. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. He died of a drug overdose before he could see his 24th birthday. The world was left stunned. This was the gifted actor who seemed so pure, so true to himself. Suddenly, he was gone. People questioned how the system had failed him, or if it was inevitable for someone so sensitive trying to live under the glare of constant attention. River's death made headlines around the globe, reminding everyone that youth and talent are never guaranteed protection from life's darkest turns. Carl Alfalfa, Switzer. He was the freckled-faced mischief maker from the Our Gang comedies, but he grew up faster than many realized. As Alfalfa, Carl Switzer brought laughs with his off-key singing and cowlick hair. Yet when the cameras stopped rolling, he had to find a way to live. The problem was that casting directors still saw him only as the cute troublemaker. Once he outgrew that look, nobody seemed to know what to do with him. He tried small movie parts, cameo appearances, and even bartending to make ends meet. Carl discovered that fame from childhood did not equal riches. He struggled with finances, sometimes even training hunting dogs to pay his bills. Tension followed him as well. One anecdote tells of a dispute over a lost hunting dog, where Carl demanded money he felt he was owed. The conflict escalated. On January 21, 1959, He went to the home of Moses Stilts, looking to settle the matter. Reports vary, but a struggle occurred. Shots were fired. Carl was hit and died. There was confusion over the exact sequence of events, with Stilts claiming self-defense, while another witness suggested Carl might have been leaving when the fatal shot was fired. Sadly, Carl's death was overshadowed by news of Cecil B. DeMille's passing, happening around the same time. He was 31, lost in the shuffle of headlines despite once being one of the most recognizable child performers in America. People who loved our gang episodes remember his grin and silly antics, not the tragic end that came too soon. He remains a reminder of how swiftly Hollywood can forget even its brightest child stars once the camera stops rolling. Dana Plato. For a while, Dana Plato was America's sweetheart, as Kimberly Drummond on Different Strokes. She was the teenage sister to Gary Coleman's Arnold and Todd Bridges' Willis. The sitcom was a major hit, and audiences adored her sweet nature. She had steady work, fan letters, and plenty of media coverage. Yet behind that success lay personal struggles. At 18, she became pregnant. The producers felt it conflicted with the show's wholesome image. They let her go. Suddenly, the steady income vanished. Dana tried to find new roles, but she was typecast as the innocent sitcom daughter. Casting directors were not interested in giving her a chance to show range. Feeling desperate, she posed for Playboy, hoping to break away from her squeaky clean image. It did not lead to the serious offers she wanted. Instead, she found trouble, drugs, financial problems, and a string of personal setbacks. She faced legal issues, including a robbery that drew headlines. Many people judged her harshly, forgetting that behind the tabloid stories was a young mother fighting to survive. She attempted various comebacks, including small indie films and talk show appearances. But the stigma followed her. She struggled with addiction, trying and failing multiple times to get clean. On May 8, 1999, she took an overdose of prescription medication in an RV parked outside her fiancé's mother's house. It was ruled a suicide. Donna was just 34. News of her death shook fans who remembered the wide-eyed teenager from TV. Her story, like so many child actors before and after her, underscored how quickly Hollywood can discard its young once they no longer fit the mold. Beverly Washburn. During the 1950s, Beverly Washburn seemed to be living a dream. She appeared in popular TV shows like The Loretta Young Show, Wagon Train, and also in beloved movies, including Old Yeller. Audiences praised her for being so natural in front of the camera. Casting directors liked her wholesome look. She was the sweet, bright girl any family show would want. Yet, as Beverly grew older, the offers slowed. She was not a little girl anymore, and Hollywood struggled to see her in more mature roles. Suddenly, the phone barely rang. Back then, early television contracts rarely offered residuals or any lasting financial support. That meant, once a show ended, the paycheck stopped. Beverly found herself looking for work outside the industry, or taking smaller parts that did not lead to bigger opportunities. She tried to adapt by exploring stage and writing. She poured her experiences into a memoir titled Real Tears, revealing her journey from cherished child star to an adult longing to be recognized for her talents. While Beverly avoided some of the darker pitfalls, like severe drug addiction or continuous run-ins with the law, she still faced her own version of heartbreak. It was the slow disappearance of her dream, replaced by bills, ordinary jobs, and a sense that Hollywood no longer cared. She talked openly about feeling left behind, a sensation shared by many former child actors. Fans still remember her from Old Yeller, but the gap between that memory and her adult life was enormous. In interviews, she often reflected on how the industry's enthusiasm for child stars can shift in an instant, leaving them wondering who they are without the spotlight. Sawyer Sweeten. Born in Texas and part of a large family, Sawyer Sweeten joined Everybody Loves Raymond at just 16 months old. alongside his twin brother Sullivan and sister Madeline. The show ran for 9 seasons, making the siblings famous before they could even understand what fame meant. Millions of viewers watched them grow up on screen. When the show ended in 2005, Sawyer tried to live a normal life. He and his twin moved back to Texas, away from Hollywood's glare. Yet the transition was complicated. He had spent almost all his childhood in front of cameras. School was not ordinary. Socializing was always overshadowed by the knowledge that people recognized him from TV. As he entered his late teens, friends noticed changes in his mood and attitude. The public mostly saw a smiling kid, but close acquaintances worried he was struggling with depression. In April 2015, to everyone's shock, Sawyer took his own life at just 19. His sister Madeline went on social media to urge people to reach out for help if they felt alone. The news rocked fans who remembered him as the funny little Jeffrey Barone. People asked why or how something so tragic could happen to someone so young. Like many child stars, Sawyer had grown up in a strange spotlight, then found himself in a quiet world without the sense of structure and purpose that the show once gave him. It was a reminder that the external image of a happy child star can hide deep internal pain. Peggy Ann Garner. In 1945, Peggy Ann Garner soared to success with her performance in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. She won a Juvenile Academy Award, receiving praise from critics who called her performance wise beyond her years. Hollywood expected big things from this gifted actress. But, as often happens, once she grew older, the industry did not know where to place her. Peggy was no longer the tiny child star with a face full of earnest wonder. Studio heads seemed uninterested in her transition to adult roles. Her mother, who had been the driving force behind her career, was known to be very controlling. Peggy might have missed a normal childhood while filming constantly. After a series of lesser roles and stage attempts, she struggled to find consistent work. To support herself, she took jobs outside acting, sometimes in sales, sometimes managing small businesses. Fans who loved her in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn might have assumed she was living a glamorous life in Hollywood. Instead, she was facing everyday realities like bills and rent. Her personal life was rocky as well. She married 3 times, each ending in divorce. Friends noted she seemed disillusioned by how quickly Hollywood forgot her. In 1984, at just 52, Peggy died of pancreatic cancer. Many of her fans only learned of her struggles after her passing. She had soared so high as a young girl, capturing the emotional complexity of her roles like few could. Then, in a blink, the industry turned away, and Peggy Ann Garner became another faded name in a town that constantly hunts for new faces. Scotty Beckett. Scotty Beckett was that adorable little boy from the Our Gang shorts, sporting a sideways cap and a charming grin. He also played young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story, winning applause for his authentic performance. People marveled at how well he could act, given his age. But as he grew up, that cherubic innocence disappeared. The phone calls for new roles slowed. Studios wanted fresh young faces, and Scotty was no longer that wide-eyed child. He discovered alcohol and later drugs. In an attempt to cope with the sense of loss and rejection, he turned to substances more frequently. He faced multiple arrests for drunk driving, drug possession, and other offenses. In 1954, he led the police on a high-speed chase before crashing and trying to flee on foot. It was a stark contrast from the lovable kid fans remembered. Financial troubles dogged him as well. Without steady roles, he found it hard to support himself. Some say he tried to clean up his act, but each time he took a step forward, something pulled him 2 steps back. On July 10, 1968, he was found dead in a Los Angeles motel room, with barbiturates nearby. He was only 38. The news didn't create much of a stir, as the passing of child actors often faded into the background. Yet for those who remembered that bright smile in old comedies, it was a painful reminder that childhood fame can lead to adult tragedy if the support and care are not there. Billy Laughlin. He was the lovable Froggy in our gang during the MGM years, a boy with an unmistakable raspy voice that made people chuckle. Billy Laughlin reportedly found this gravelly tone by imitating Popeye, and it became his signature. But when our gang ended in 1944, Billy stepped away from Hollywood. He didn't chase movie parts, perhaps preferring a normal life away from cameras and studios. For a while, it seemed like he might escape the fate of many other child stars. Tragically, Billy never had the chance to decide what his future would hold. On August 31st, 1948, he was delivering newspapers with a friend on a motor scooter when a truck hit them. Billy was thrown nearly 40 feet, suffering massive injuries. He died that same day, just 16 years old. While some child actors faced struggles for years, Billy's life ended before he could face adulthood. Fans of our gang remember him as the kid with the funny voice and the big glasses, forever frozen in black and white shorts, that made generations laugh. For others, his passing was a somber reminder that sometimes the biggest tragedy is having your life cut short before you can even figure out who you are. Billy Laughlin was never given the chance to wrestle with the ups and downs of an acting career. His story is a heartbreak of a different kind, sudden, unexpected, and final. Bobby Jordan. People often think of the Dead End Kids, the East Side Kids, or the Bowery Boys, and conjure images of scrappy city youths trading witty banter. Bobby Jordan was central to that ensemble in the late 1930s and early 1940s. His fresh face and quick comedic timing helped make the series a success. But within that group, certain members like Leo Gorcey and Hunts Hall stood out more, and Bobby's role started to shrink. Feeling overshadowed and underpaid, he decided to leave. Leaving the series meant losing the steady paycheck. Hollywood was big, and Bobby quickly learned that fame did not guarantee work. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces during World War II, but injuries and health concerns plagued him. When he returned to civilian life, he hoped to restart his acting career, but the momentum was gone. Casting directors weren't lining up for him. He took any job he could, working as a bartender, doorman, and even selling photographs door to door. Alcohol became an escape from his worries. Friends said he drifted from one place to another, never finding solid ground. By the time the 1960s arrived, he was a man in his early 40s with failing health and few resources. Liver cirrhosis contributed to his death in 1965. He was 42. It was a quiet end for someone who had once been part of a youth ensemble that enthralled audiences. Bobby's story revealed another layer of the child star dilemma. Even if you manage to avoid early scandal, the industry can still leave you behind. Gary Coleman. When Different Strokes premiered, Gary Coleman's witty comebacks and bright smile made him an instant favorite. As Arnold Jackson, he dropped the famous line, "What you talking about?" that still resonates in pop culture. Despite his on-screen charm, Gary's life behind the scenes was complicated. He was born with a congenital kidney disease that stunted his growth and required frequent medical attention. Even as he racked up fame and money, he fought serious health issues. His parents and advisors managed his earnings, but Gary later accused them of mismanagement. By the time he reached adulthood, he realized most of his fortune was gone. Lawsuits followed. He found it hard to get roles that allowed him to grow beyond the wisecracking kid persona. Meanwhile, personal frustrations boiled over. He had public arguments, and sometimes fans would mock his small stature or remind him of the catchphrase he was tired of hearing. He took jobs as a security guard, sometimes making headlines for minor altercations. Financial instability haunted him. Despite attempts to run for political office or appear on reality television, he never regained the success he had as a child. His health worsened in his 40s. In 2010, Gary Coleman died from an intracranial hemorrhage after a fall. He was 42. For many, his life symbolized how a child star could be beloved by millions, yet remain unprotected in the real world. No matter how many people recognized his face, Gary struggled to secure the happiness and security he so deeply wanted. Brad Renfro. Brad Renfro came to prominence at age 11 when he starred opposite Susan Sarandon and Tommy Lee Jones in The Client. Critics praised him for his natural grit and emotional depth. He seemed unafraid to tackle heavy subjects. The next few years brought more roles, and people said he was on track to become a major actor of his generation. But as with many young stars, the pressures of fame struck early. Brad struggled with substance use in his teens. There were arrests for marijuana and cocaine possession. He tried to keep working, appearing in films like Bully and Ghost World. But the personal problems cast a long shadow over his career. Some directors were hesitant to hire him, fearing he was too risky. Brad bounced in and out of rehab, sometimes showing progress, other times falling deeper into old patterns. He wanted to break away from the bad boy reputation, but found it hard. By his early 20s, it was clear that the promise of his youth was slipping away. On January 15, 2008, Brad Renfro was found dead in his Los Angeles apartment from a heroin overdose. He was 25. The news was overshadowed in the media by the death of Heath Ledger a week later, another young actor gone far too soon. Brad's passing became a footnote for many, but those who worked with him recalled a genuinely talented, sensitive young man who struggled to cope with fame and personal demons. He serves as another testament to how quickly Hollywood can devour its own. Matthew Garber. Anyone who loves Disney's Mary Poppins remembers the charming Banks children, especially the rosy-cheeked little boy with an impish grin. That was Matthew Garber, who portrayed Michael Banks with a sense of wonder and fun. He also appeared in 2 more Disney films, The 3 Lives of Thomasina and The Gnome Mobile. But after that, he stepped away from acting. As he grew older, he seemed uninterested in pursuing Hollywood further. Little is documented about his teenage years. Some say he traveled or studied. Others say he just wanted a normal life. Then, in 1976, while in India, he contracted hepatitis. Accounts vary as to how he got it. Some speculate it was from unsanitary conditions. By the time he returned to London for treatment, the disease had advanced to his pancreas. Matthew Garber died in 1977, at the age of 21. The tragedy was that it happened when he was so far removed from the career that had once brought him fame as a little boy. His death went largely unnoticed at the time, overshadowed by bigger industry news. Disney fans eventually learned of his passing years later. For those who remembered his performance in Mary Poppins, it was a shock to find out he had died so young. He never had the chance to explore adult acting roles or any other life path. His story is sad because it wasn't so much about Hollywood exploitation, but rather a life that ended too early, leaving people wondering what might have been if he had lived longer. Bobby Buntrock. He was known for playing Harold Baxter on the 1960s sitcom Hazel. The show featured Shirley Booth as the lovable maid who often outsmarted her employers, and Bobby Buntrock played her young charge. The series brought him plenty of attention. Yet as soon as Hazel ended in 1966, roles were few. He aged out of the cute kid persona. Instead of pushing hard to stay in entertainment, Bobby decided to return to his home state of South Dakota. He finished high school, trying to live a life away from the Hollywood spotlight. Tragedy struck on April 7, 1974, when Bobby's car plunged off a damaged bridge into Rapid Creek. The bridge had been compromised by a flood 2 years earlier, and repairs were still ongoing. Some reports suggest the warning signs were insufficient. Others say he might not have noticed them. By the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. Bobby was just 21, gone in an instant. The sadness is that Bobby seemed to avoid the typical child star pitfalls of drug use or long-term legal issues. He led a quiet life, content to be out of the limelight. Yet fate was cruel in another way. Fans remembered him as the innocent child actor who never had the chance to see what his adult future could hold. Newspapers reported his death briefly, and then, like so many stories of child stars, it faded from mainstream attention. Bobby's fate stands as a stark reminder that tragedy does not always follow the familiar script of Hollywood meltdown. Sometimes, it comes in a sudden, unthinkable moment. Lee Thompson Young. In the mid-1990s, Disney fans welcomed Lee Thompson Young as the titular star of the famous Jet Jackson. He was charismatic, athletic, and a role model for many kids who tuned in to watch his adventures. From an early age, Lee displayed genuine talent and a disciplined approach to acting. Unlike many child actors, he seemed to carry himself with poise, continuing to work in various television roles into adulthood. He appeared in shows like Friday Night Lights and Rizzoli and Isles. But beneath his calm surface, Lee battled private demons. Unknown to many, he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He coped quietly, not often sharing details of his mental health struggles with the public. On sets, colleagues described him as polite, focused, and kind. Nobody guessed he was fighting an internal war. Over time, the strain of managing his condition may have grown heavier. On August 19, 2013, Lee took his own life at age 29. His death shocked friends, family, and fans. People who knew him said he had much left to give: plans for new projects, a steady role on a hit TV series, and a life that seemed full of possibility. But like many living with bipolar disorder, the darkness can become overwhelming. In the weeks that followed, discussions arose about mental health awareness and the need for better support systems, especially in an industry that often prizes image over well-being. Lee Thompson Young's story remains a poignant example of how a talented performer can hide great pain behind a gentle smile. George "Spanky" McFarland. During the 1930s and early 1940s, George "Spanky" McFarland was the face of our gang. Audiences delighted in his chubby cheeks and spirited antics. As the ringleader of the group's schemes, Spanky stole the hearts of millions. But once our gang ended, McFarland discovered that Hollywood had limited room for a former child star. Casting directors couldn't envision him as anything but that little boy leading pranks. He found various odd jobs, including sales positions, and even climbed corporate ladders in companies like Philco Ford. Occasionally, he would appear on TV or at nostalgia events, but the consistent acting career he might have dreamed of never materialized. Financial ups and downs marked his life. He sometimes expressed frustration at being forever known as Spanky, even though that role had given him fame in the first place. Yet he also recognized that fans held a deep affection for him. He was grateful for that, but it never fully erased the challenges of being typecast for decades. He once joked that if he had $1 for every time someone said, "Hey, Spanky," he would have been a millionaire many times over. He died of a heart attack in 1993 at age 64. By then, he had come to terms with his legacy. The sad truth was that Hollywood can shower a child with adoration for a few short years, then forget about them. Spanky's smile and comedic timing live on in old film reels. But the path after childhood stardom was never as bright as those timeless black and white images suggested. Diana Sarah Carey, Baby Peggy. In the silent film era, Baby Peggy was a superstar. Before she could even speak in full sentences, she was earning a fortune, starring in one-reel comedies and major features alike. Studio heads marveled at how she followed directions without fuss. They put her in dangerous situations, from standing close to fires to performing stunts that would be unthinkable for a toddler today. Her face was on merchandise, and she was hailed as one of Hollywood's biggest box office draws. Money rolled in, by some estimates, over $1 million before she turned 6. But her father, a former stuntman, mismanaged her funds. He also clashed with powerful producers, leading to Baby Peggy's abrupt blacklisting. By the time she was 7, her career was essentially over. The family's wealth evaporated. As she grew into her teens, she struggled to find identity outside of being Baby Peggy. She worked odd jobs, sometimes in offices or stores, far from the glamour of the movie sets she once knew. In adulthood, she changed her name to Diana Sarah Carey. Rather than hide from her past, she became a writer and historian, detailing the exploitation child actors faced in early Hollywood. She fought for better legal protections alongside people like Jackie Coogan, pushing for laws that prevented parents from spending all their children's earnings. Her books and interviews provided a rare look into that silent film world from someone who lived it. Diana lived to be 101, passing away in 2020 as the last surviving silent film star. She left behind a legacy, not just of old movie reels, but of advocacy and truth-telling. Her life story highlighted how the bright lights of Hollywood can shine on a child until the moment a parent or a studio decides otherwise. Hollywood can be a place of wonder, creating unforgettable moments that unite families in laughter and tears. But it can also be an unforgiving machine, hungry for new faces and quick to discard those it no longer needs. Each of the 21 young performers mentioned here had a spark that made them special. Their talents lit up television sets and movie screens. Their voices, their faces, and their personalities stayed with audiences long after the credits rolled. Yet each one paid a price,